Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Mursaleen, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Respected Professor Dr. Muhammad Aminul Islam, Professor, Faculty of Applied Sciences and Humanities, University of Malaysia, Parlis. Honorable Mr. Zahirul Islam, President, Bangladeshi Students Union Malaysia, BSUM. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and a very good afternoon. We are going to start today's workshop on developing the theoretical framework, concepts, theories, models, and applications. I am Muhammad Burhanuddin. I will be the moderator for today's session. I am Vice President of Bangladeshi Students Union Malaysia, and I am doing PhD in Islamic Banking and Finance at International Islamic University, Malaysia. However, we have participants from different parts of the world, around 30 countries, and more than 400 students registered. Alhamdulillah.
Assalamu alaikum and very good afternoon. Sorry, I did not switch on my microphone and I was speaking. All right, as we understand that we have participants from various parts of the world, so a very good morning, very good afternoon, and a very good evening. We welcome you all to this session today. I hope the session would be very beneficial, useful, and relevant to all of you, those of you who are participating in this webinar today. First of all, let me express my gratitude to the organizer. The organizer of this mega webinar is the Bangladeshi Student Union of Malaysia. Consisted of students, those are pursuing PhDs and masters or degree programs in Malaysian different universities. And then the co-organizers are basically University Malaysia Perlis, that's where I work. And then University Tun Hussein Malaysia, University Technical Melaka. Then we have the Northern University Bangladesh for the first time joining us as a co-organizer, as well as we have two research center. One is Center for Advanced Research, and the other one is, let me get it, I always forget this, Center for Integrated Research and Policy Studies. So these are basically the organizer for today's webinar, and I would like to congratulate them and acknowledge and appreciate their efforts for organizing this webinar. Well, with that, let me start the session today. As I told many participants who has communicated with me last few days, I promised them that I will go very slow so that everybody participates here can understand me very well, because we do have participants who are doing masters now. Some participants are doing PhDs. Some participants have completed PhDs. I do have also participants senior than me. Even professors do attend my sessions. So I have to make sure I balance up, the deliberations so that it suits everyone who participate in the session. Okay. So give me a few seconds to share my screen with you. আসছে আপনি আসলে একটু বলেন all right so today's topic is developing the theoretical framework, theories, models, and applications, and I am attached to University Malaysia Perlis at the Faculty of Applied and Human Sciences, and I have given you my email address and as well as WhatsApp number in case any one of you would like to communicate with me if there is an issue that you feel you would like to consult with me. The numbers and emails are there. And I have launched a YouTube channel in March this year. The platform for research and development. The purpose of this channel is to facilitate researchers learning from very beginning up to concluding of your PhD. So we have uploaded some videos, and hopefully I wish that in 6 months time you will have about 100 videos. So anyone who like to know something that helps them to do PhD, so you'll get everything there. There's like one-stop center for research methods. All right, so let me start with this slide. The high achievement always takes place in the framework of high expectations. All right, so if you would like to achieve something very good, then your framework got to be very well. Your expectation got to be high. You have to set an expectation that will force you to work hard, that provides you some kind of motivation and inspiration to achieve that. So we cannot set a target that we may not be able to achieve. But if you set a high target, if you cannot achieve, at least we will reach near to that. So when you will undertake a research, either master's or PhD, or if you are just doing a research to publish a good paper, then we have to set a target before we start. Okay, so the expectation got to be high, and then only we will achieve something that is expected of a PhD student or master's student. Just one slide on research definition to remind you that research is undertaken basically to solve a problem, to find out a solution of a problem that affects the industry, academia, society, the nation, and the world at large. Okay, but again, when we try to solve a problem by doing research, the research got to be organized with specific objectives, and there should be systematic process to undertake the study. So first point, we always have to remember that when we undertake research, first of all, we have to identify and define a research problem correctly, so that we will have a good solution for the problem that been identified. And I have been always giving examples to my webinars to students that when a patient or person does not feel very well, he feels unhealthy, the person will go and see the doctor. And when he meets the doctor, doctor will have some systematic process of diagnosing the disease. If doctor follows systematic process, organized way of diagnosing the disease, then he might be giving you the right medicine that will cure you. But if doctor fails to identify your problem correctly, then he might give you wrong medicine and you will end up having more problem. All right, so this is how research works. You need to have a problem that is identified clearly and defined clearly, so that you can end up having good solution, good outcomes from a research. Now, this is a conceptualization of a research study. It starts with research problem, and then we'll have purpose statement. Then we will translate the research problem into few research questions. We'll have research objectives, and then we will translate research questions into research hypotheses. Today's session, I'll be talking a lot about it during the session, inshallah. So this is how the components looks like for an empirical research. It doesn't matter whether it is a business, social science, or it is a pure science, or applied science, or engineering, or medical research. Most of the empirical research will follow these steps. All right, so that's where we are in now. I put it in the red mark. So we start with research problem. Then we translate research problem into research questions. Then we identify the theories and assumptions through literature review, and then we will develop the theoretical framework. All right, so that's where we are in now. So those of you who have listened to my videos available in my YouTube channel on research problem and literature review, then you will have, I think you will find it very easy to understand today's lecture. If you have not seen it, then I will recommend that after this session, please put an effort to download or watch online video on research problem as well as systematic literature review. Then this session would be very easy for you to understand, inshallah. All right, this is a tree analogy that I have been talking about. So today's session is on theoretical framework. So let me show you where does it stand. So theoretical framework is like the body of a tree. Okay, so if you have roots and you don't have a body, then you don't have a tree. Okay, so it doesn't matter even the roots are very strong, but it doesn't have a body, that tree wouldn't be able to bear the fruits. Okay, the branches of the trees and leaves. So that's how important the theoretical framework is. Okay, so theoretical framework is very important for a research because that will define the kinds of fruits, the volume of fruits, that quantity of fruits that you can bear. So we will do some specific systematic literature review. We'll identify theories to understand the phenomena that we have, and then we'll draw a theoretical framework for research. Now, this is how the flow usually goes on. Right? We say it's a good flow and logical sequence. So we'll have a topic which is very general. Then we will narrow it down to research problem. And then we'll narrow it down more to research statements. Then we'll go specific to research questions. All right. And then later, we will translate those research questions into research hypotheses. So we start with very general topic, and finally we will narrow it down, and we'll come down up to like research questions and research hypotheses. This slide is very important also for us to understand. This is unit of analysis, which is very important for us to understand. It is basically the unit that we analyze. So this one is deeply rooted in the research problem. Okay, so we collect data where the research problem is situated, right? So we identify and define research problem. So if the research problem is revolving around individuals, then we'll collect data from individual. Okay, and if the research problem is revolving around households, then our unit of analysis, the data collection will be from households. And if you are doing a study on organization, say for example, the problem is with organization itself, then we will collect the data from organization. Our unit of analysis will be organization. And same goes on like departments, geographical areas, or even objects like products and advertisement. So we have to be very careful. We have to remember that the problem that we identify, that become the nucleus of research, and from where we start on to doing the research. So if the problem involves individual, the unit of analysis would be individual. We'll collect data from individual. Okay. If the problem involves organization, then unit of analysis should be organization, and we'll collect data from organization. But I got to remind you here a very important aspect of when we are talking about theories with relevant to unit of analysis. When you look at theories or review theories, there are many theories which are for individual level, and there are theories for organization level. If your unit of analysis is individual, then you cannot choose organization level theories. And if your unit of analysis is organization, then you cannot choose individual level theories. Okay, which is very important for you to understand. Now, the next question is, how would you know whether this theory is an individual level theory or this theory is an organization level theory, right? So that's confusion will be always there. To understand that, what we need to do is we got to look at the assumptions of the theory. Every theory is proposed based on assumptions, certain assumptions, okay? If those assumptions are not right, then the theory goes wrong. So it is very important to look at the assumptions. So if you are trying to understand whether the theory is basically individual level theory or the theory is an organization level theory, then definitely you have to look at the assumptions. If you review the assumptions, then you will understand whether the theory is an individual level theory or it is an organization level theory. I hope this clarifies at least one point, which is very important in unit of analysis. Those PhD final viva voce session that I chair and even attend as internal or external examiner, this is a common question asked to the student. What is your unit of analysis? And often we'll find the students will be looking at us like the first time he is hearing the term unit of analysis. So this is a very basic term that everyone is expected to understand it, okay? Let me proceed to the next slide. Once we identify the research problem, depending on the nature of the problem, depending on the issues that leads you to the problem, we will basically look at or define the kind of type of studies we'd like to choose, okay? So there are basically 5 types of studies are there. The first one is definitely reporting. Basically, we can just collect the data, we try to go into detail, and we just provide, just report whatever we understand from the data. Okay, and then we may have even descriptive study if the problem requires you to describe the nature of problems. So you will try to answer the question like who, what, when, where, and sometimes even how. Okay, so that is descriptive. So if the nature of problem is such that you got to describe the problem, people even do not know the problem, do not understand the problem, then you have to conduct a research to describe the problem itself. That could be a study, right? So it's a type of study, call it descriptive. You may even conduct a predictive study, whereby we say that we attempt to predict when and what situation and event will occur. Okay, so again, it depends on the nature of the problem that we identify. It could be based on which industry or the society or nation that's affecting you. All right, so we may choose to undertake a predictive type of research. The next one basically is more deeper, explanatory research design, whereby we try to explain the reasons for the phenomenon. We try to explain why that problem occurs and then how can we solve that. Okay, explanatory. So it's basically causal type of study that we undertake. So again, depends on the nature of the problem. And finally, exploratory, the more deeper into the issues that we go in. So we say exploratory research is conducted for a problem which was not well researched before, demand priorities and generate operational definition and provides a better researched model. Okay, so we try to go more in depth of the issue and then we try to provide solution into the problem. Okay, so we have to choose one of this type of research depending on the nature of research problem that we have identified and defined. Now there are certain languages we always use in our studies or research projects that we undertake. We start with concepts. Okay, I'm going to have a slide on it, so I will discuss more on these topics later. All right, so concepts, model, theories, constructs, conceptual scheme, operational definition, variables, and hypotheses. These are the common jargons that we use in research, and I have slides for each of these topics later, so I do not want to waste time on this. All right, so I'll have more explanation on this later. All right, let us move into detail now, right? When we say theoretical framework, it means that a framework that is developed with a theory. That's what is very important. Huh? We have to understand that. Many students ask me question like, can we have a research without a theory? I say definitely, but that is not with theoretical framework. Then we'll go with the concept. Then you will have a conceptual framework. But if you are using the term theoretical framework in a research, then it must be developed with the existence of a theory. Okay, so how does a theory comes in? It all starts with ideas. So first of all, we'll have ideas, and ideas just come from anywhere at any time, and not all ideas will be relevant, may not be useful. So we have to screen ideas. So there are a number of ways we do screen ideas, right? We talk to people, we consult with experts, we do little survey, we read literature, we read books, we do that all to screen ideas, and finally, out of say 10, 15 ideas, we'll find one seems to be feasible, seems to be useful, seems to be beneficial. All right, so when we screen the idea and the idea seems to be more understandable, it becomes concept. Okay, then from concept we will develop the construct. Construct is in research also we call it a variable. Okay, so we'll go to more detail in the next slide. I will explain it to you after these slides. And from construct we'll go for propositions, which are basically hypotheses. We will assume some relationship between construct. Okay, so when those constructs are proven, then it will become a theory. All right, so that's how we look at, right? The idea is basically a thought or suggestion as to a possible course of action, right? So it's basically just something that comes from our intuitive, inquisitive mind, and then we think about it, and then sometimes we thought it's a very good idea, but when you start talking to people, you will see people might be calling it a stupid idea because they do not feel that it is something relevant, something useful. Okay, but unfortunately, the truth is the stupid ideas are always the best ideas. Okay, because when the ideas are not understandable by everyone or not understood by everyone, meaning that you are talking about something very different, something very special, something can be separated from others. Okay, so that's the reason we have to do screening of ideas. Okay, so from there we'll develop the concept. So this is the second building blocks of a theory. You can actually visualize it through a word picture or mental data, a mental idea of a phenomenon. Okay, so you can symbolize it. You can somehow depict it that this is something like that. So that becomes the concept. And then from concept we move to the next building blocks of a theory, which is called construct. So we say basically it is used to identify a phenomenon or a situation that can be directly observed but needs to be inferred by certain concrete, concentrate and abstract indicators and phenomena. That's where we are saying it is basically a variable, right? So it has to be observable, it has to be measurable. Okay, so we use certain procedure to measure it. We observe the phenomena, that is your concept, you can visualize it, and then after that we measure it. So we reach at the level we can measure the concept, that become the construct. So when you have constructs in one research problem, you may have many constructs. All right, so then we'll assume relationship between constructs. Those relationship become the proposition. All right, so we said statement or assertion of a relationship between concept theories and generalization founded on empirical data sources of proposition statements. All right, so it's basically the hypothesis that you call it. Every theory will have assumptions. Okay, so when those assumptions are proved, it become a theory. All right, those of you of finance, we know Miller and Modigliani or MM theory, right? It based on two assumptions, two propositions. Okay, likewise, all the theories, we have certain proposition and assumptions, and when those assumptions are proved, just propositions are proved through some research, then it become a theory. Okay, so a theory is basically a supposition, a system of ideas intended to explain something, especially one based on general principles independent of the thing to be explained. Okay, so I will have more discussion about theories later. I hope it is very clear how we develop a theory from this slide. So it starts with ideas. From ideas we screen, then when we can visualize it, we can symbolize it, it become a concept. And then when we can measure it with some observation and some data, then it become constructs. Basically, we may have many constructs to define a research problem. And then when we assume some kind of relationship, then it become proposition or hypothesis. And when those hypotheses are proved, tested with the data and proved, then it become a theory. Now, in research also, those of you who are doing PhD now and you have moved into chapter 3, you know, in chapter 1, we will have definition of terms. So we might define the terms, most of the important variables, right, in chapter 1, which we take from different authors and different people. But then when we move to chapter 3, we need to have our own operational definition. There are many different definitions of each variable. Then we have to have our own definition that is used in my research. Okay, so that's what is operational definition of a construct. Okay, so we go for operationalization of the construct. So we have ideas, then we convert into concept, then we move into construct. So we say it is basically a generalized idea about a class of object, attributes, occurrences, right? Then we move into operational definition. Then we may have dimension under that, and then we'll have items. All right, we call it elements. So when you are mentioning a construct, we will define it operationally, the one I am using for my research. That's what you call operational definition of a variable. And then under one variable, you may have few dimensions. Those of you already moved into chapter 3, PhD students, definitely would understand it. And those of us completed, we know. Under one construct, under one variable, you may have few dimensions. And then we have to develop questionnaires or items based on the dimension that we have. I remember I was sharing a session in last month, and then the examiners were drilling the student to see whether he has covered all the dimension of a construct, okay? And then whether he has items to measure every dimensions. And that's where the students will struggle during the Viva versus session. So this slide is very critical for many students, all right, to understand it. So when you have a variable, you need to have operational definition, that is your definition, that is you use in your research. And then under one construct, you may have few dimensions, okay? So you have to take care of those few dimensions. Say, for example, you're measuring organization performance. You may have two dimensions there, financial and non-financial. I'm giving very simple example. You may have financial and non-financial. So you have two dimensions. So when you are designing questionnaire, make sure you have items for financial, you have items for non-financial. Likewise, even for your independent variable or moderating variable or mediating variable, you may have dimensions. You may have dimensions. You may not have dimensions. So if you have dimension, make sure you take care of all dimensions and you have items to measure all the dimensions of a construct. Now, we move into more detail, right? More in depth. Now we look at the theory. What is a theory? It's a Greek word, theorem, which means that a proposition to be proved. So, as I mentioned earlier, all theories are proposed based on assumptions, and then we collect data. When those assumptions or hypotheses are proved, then we call it a theory. Okay. So there are many different definitions of theories are there. I have put it on my slide. You can see there are 4 kind of definition there. So the easiest definition is theory is basically a set of related statements that describe or explain phenomena in a systematic way. So later when I show you the slide, I'm going to show you the variables and how they are related to each other. Then you will understand this. Okay, the next definition we say it is a broad abstract characterization of a phenomena, a generalization that presents a systematic explanation about relationship among phenomena. So again, we are going to look at the relationship between constructs that we have developed. Okay, the next 2 definition I'm going to skip, and let me assure you that this slide should be available in my YouTube channel. When this video will be available in my YouTube channel, you have to look at the message box there in the comments box, sorry. Under there, I will attach the PP slides for you. You can get it from there. All right, what is why it is so important of having a theory? And this guy, Auguste Comte, right? I'm not sure whether I pronounced his name correctly. He mentioned that facts can be observed without the guidance of some theory. So he said facts can be observed without guidance of a theory. Okay, but without such guidance, our facts would be desultory or fruitless. We couldn't retain them, and for the most part, we couldn't even perceive them. Meaning that facts can be observed without a theory, but theory provides guidance. With that guidance, you may not remember what you have observed, and the meaning of those facts, the explanation, elaboration of that facts may not be possible without having a theory. All right. So we move into the next slide. There are many different kinds of theories available, and as a research student, we have to understand every type of theories that is available. Most often that I see students are not very sure what kind of theory they use as underpinning theory or supporting theories in their research. The first kind of theory, you call it descriptive theory. A theory basically that describes or presents a phenomena. It explains why an event is associated with another event. Okay. Remember, I said there are 5 types of research there. So if you are talking about a descriptive research design, if you have chosen the descriptive research design, then you are using the descriptive research, descriptive theory to underpinning or to underpin your theoretical framework. Okay, so if you find a theory that basically describes a phenomena, describe a situation, describe a problem, all right, so that is basically descriptive theory. And then we do have grand theory, or we call it macro theory, that basically describe large segments of human experiences. There are theories that covers almost every aspects of our life, like the hierarchy of needs, right? We start from basic needs until the few stages are there. So That kind of theory basically covers every aspects of human life. Or you have a theory that covers a large segment of an organization, the workers or the employees, the kind of situation they face. That theory describes most of it. For example, if you look at job satisfaction and employee motivation, then we do have a Hashbach theory, right? Motivational theory. We do have hygiene theory. So those theory definitely covers the areas of motivation, the areas of job satisfaction, dissatisfaction, all that. Could be a grand theory also, right? So a theory which is a large theory, okay, large theory that covers large segment of human experience in a society, in industry, in a nation, or in world at large. That's what we call it a grand or macro theory. And then we move on to next one. We call it middle range theory, more specific to certain phenomena. Say, for example, theory of planned behavior. Those of you are familiar with marketing and management research, theory of planned behavior that explain people's intention or attitude towards something, right? That could be a middle range theory. Or for finance, as I mentioned earlier, the MM proposition or Miller-Modiglieri theory, MM theory, that could be a middle range theory, right? But in finance and accounting, when you look at agency theory, that might be a grand theory, because that covers a huge segment of dealings in an organization. So we have many different kinds of theories out there. So which theory we choose, it depends on the kind of research problem that we have. And based on that, the type of research we have chosen, right? We have reporting type of research, design, we have descriptive, we have explanatory, we have exploratory, we have predictive. So there are 5 kinds of research design. So the kind of research design you choose based on the problem that is in hand, based on that we'll choose the kind of theory that we feel would underpin my theoretical framework, okay? Then moving into the next one, we call it a borrowed theory. Nursing model used by a nurse researcher, meaning that a theory has been proposed, okay, and then it has not been tested yet. Say, for example, a theory has been proposed by a researcher in Malaysia, and they found it very effective in measuring or finding solution to a specific problem. Then someone from Indonesia borrowed that theory, okay? It has not been tested in Indonesian context. So the researcher has taken that model from Malaysia and tried to conduct a research in Malaysia, in Indonesia, to see whether that model is applicable in the context of Indonesia, all right? So that's what we call borrowed theory. You are borrowing a theory from someone and trying to test it for the first time in a context, okay? Now, the next one, we call it shared theory. When you borrow a theory and then we do a research and we find that it is effective in my situation also, then it becomes a shared theory. Okay, so borrowed theory is when somebody has proposed a theory and has not been tested in a new context. Then I take that one and then I implement that, use that in my research. And when I find it is effective in solving the problem in hand, it becomes a shared theory, all right? And then the last one is grounded theory, which is very important theory for students or researchers who undertake qualitative study. So when you undertake a research with a clear identification and definition of a research problem, and you couldn't find any theory, descriptive, grand theory, middle range theory, borrowed theory, shared theory, none of these theories support you in your research. Okay, so that is the kind of question I get from many students. Students will ask me, Prof, I cannot find any theory to support my research. So in that case, we will advise the student, then you have to choose the qualitative study. So you collect the data, and then from the data you start, exploring into using different kind of analysis and come out with a theory. So when you collect the data, basically you have just absurd idea. From there you convert into concept, then you follow to construct, then you have assumed some relationship, and then finally you tested it, and then it become a theory, okay? So when you are proposing a theory based on data-driven analysis or data-driven explanations, it become a grounded theory, okay? So that answers the question of whether should I choose qualitative study, or should I choose to go for quantitative study? Okay, it's not simply like I want to do a qualitative study or I want to do a quantitative study. It's not like that. Okay, so when we have the problem in hand, we look into it, right? We have different way of defining the research problem. Then we identify the issues that cause the problem. Then we try to find some theories. If you have clear-cut theories on it that helps you to underpin the research, then you should be going for quantitative study. You have the theory already there. But if you found a problem which cannot be explained with the theory, and you don't have any theory, then you should be going for qualitative study, whereby you will have grounded theories there for you to underpin your research. Okay, so this is what you say, the grounded theory represents inductive investigation, which the researchers poses question about the information provided by respondents or taken from historical records. So you are collecting data from respondents, or you're collecting data from historical records, and from there you conduct investigation, you do analysis and all that, and finally you come out with some kind of a proposition. This is basically grounded theory. To understand more on inductive or deductive research, you have to listen to some other presentation, especially on systematic literature review. I have explained with step-by-step procedures of looking at inductive and deductive research. So I hope you will listen to those videos available in my video YouTube channel. Now, what are the functions of theoretical framework? Basically, theoretical framework, it basically provides the scope of your research. It set a boundary, you know. We know the framework. If you put your photo in the framework, so that is you inside. Okay, people can only see that. People cannot see more than what you have in the frame. So your theoretical framework is like that. In the framework, those variables that you have put, that is the scope of your study. You already set a clear boundary of your research. Okay, so that's how important the theoretical framework is. So the theoretical framework will also provide some kind of guidance in your data analysis, because you have measurable variable identified. Then you will construct hypotheses, all right, and then based on that you will analyze the data. It will definitely identify the variable that you're going to measure. Variables should be there. I'm going to show you one by one later. It explains why one variable is possibly affect the other variable, how one variable is related to another variable, all right, and definitely it stimulates analyzing and interpreting of data. Okay, is it important to have theoretical framework for all research? Not really. Not really. If you are doing a research whereby your framework is underpinned with a theory or few theories, then you need a theoretical framework. But again, for finance, accounting, and economics research, you may not need a framework, because you may use model. Okay, so I'm going to show you how the modeling works. Even in the research for pure science or applied science, or medical or engineering studies, you may not need a theoretical framework. Rather, you will go for modeling. Okay, and if you are doing a research in social science, also there are cases whereby you may not need a theoretical framework. Rather, you would need a conceptual framework. Towards the end of presentation today, I'm going to also show you how conceptual framework works, okay, for social science research. But if you're doing a study in management or marketing, most of the time it's expected that you're supposed to have a theoretical framework. Now, this is a variable, right? We say a variable is the property being studied. We have been talking about a variable, so the definition of variable basically. If we look at the term a variable itself, we know it comes from vary, right? It varies. So something that is not static, something that changes, all right? For example, the act of purchase. When you purchase, you do not always purchase similar volume, okay, spending similar amount of money. The trait personality, you know, the traits and personality of person. So a person is always, a person doesn't always behave similarly, right? Sometimes he's tough, sometimes he's soft, right? Sometimes he's angry, sometimes he's smiling. So that's what variable is, something that varies. Attributes of communication skill. Not everyone would be having similar skill, or even the same person may not be always skillful in all situations, all right? the characteristics of like always, and we are looking at when price increases and decreases and all that. So you're looking at the price, for example, price of a commodity is not always fixed, it goes up and goes down. So a variable is something that varies, it's not something that it is static, okay? It's not something that it is stable, okay? Something unstable that varies time to time, from situation to situation, and that's what we call variable. This one you have to keep in mind, because later through discussions we'll be having this term, we call it variable. Now there are many different kind of variables available. The first one we call it dichotomous or categorical variable, like male, female, like married, single, and divorced. We may be employed and unemployed. So those are basically dichotomous. And discrete variable are like ethnic background, like in Malaysia we have Malays, Chinese, Indian, and others. So many countries we have ethnic background there. Education level, like O level, A level, degree, masters. And the religious affiliation, we have different kind of affiliation, right? So even if you have two categories like male, female, employed, unemployed, then it is dichotomous, two categories. If you have more than two categories, categorical, but more than two categories, it becomes discrete, okay? And the last one is continuous. For example, if you put in the questionnaire income and then you keep it blank, and people like different kind of income that they draw, then it becomes continuous variable. If you put age and you put it blank, so people just write the age, it becomes continuous. But be careful, be mindful that if you put in the questionnaire age group, say for example below 20, 21 to 25, 26 to 30, so it becomes discrete variable again, categorical, no more continuous, okay? And when we are putting the Likert scale or Likert scale question, strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree. If you put that kind of scale, then basically we will convert items into variable later, so it will become also continuous variable. All right. There are many kind of variables available in research. The first one we call it dependent variable. That is the focus of your research. Say for example, you are doing a study titled Factors Affecting Job Satisfaction in the Manufacturing Industry in Malaysia. Then the job satisfaction is the dependent variable, because job satisfaction is dependent on other variables, okay? So that's what we call dependent variable. It cannot stand alone. It is basically dependent on others, okay? So the main research problem become dependent variable, and now all the issues that cause the problem become independent variable, okay? So the dependent variable is the main theme of the topic. You got to be very careful. By looking at the title itself, we know what is dependent variable and what are possible independent variables, okay? So independent variables are the assumed causes of a problem, okay? So I said, if you are looking at doing a study on job satisfaction, the possible causes could be the salary, could be the leadership style, could be the working environment. So those causes, three become independent variable, and your job satisfaction become dependent variable. All right. And then when we have something in between independent and dependent, we will call them as intervening variable, okay? Say for example, if you are looking at mother and father. So once you are married, only the husband and wife, there is no intervening variable. There are, right? There are. Like our mothers, our fathers, our brothers, sisters, they become intervening variable. But once we have kids, the kids become the intervening variable. Sometimes the relationship between husbands and wife is dependent on how kids behave at home, right? Or how our fathers or mothers are behaving with us. So those become like intervening variable. All right. Basically it can weaken, or it may increase or strengthen the relationship between independent and dependent variable. But again, this intervening variable are divided into two. One we call it moderating variable. The other one we call it mediating variable. And sometimes we do have also control variable, but that doesn't really intervene much, okay? But again, it intervenes a lot. We will explain that later. So let me recall back. So the main problem of the main problem that we undertake for our research become dependent variable. The causes of the problem become independent variable, and anything come in between dependent and independent become intervening variable. And that intervening variable is divided into two: moderating and mediating. Now, the moderating variable refers to a variable that can strengthen, diminish, or negate or otherwise alter the association between independent and dependent variable. Okay, so I'm going to show you later how we draw it and what does it mean. Say, for example, if we choose our kids as moderating variable, so the kind of kids that we have at home may strengthen the relationship between husband and wife, or may even weaken the relationship between husband and wife. Okay, so that's what we say moderating variable. All right, so something that helps to improve the relationship, or even something that may diminish the relationship between the two. Okay, that's moderating variable. And a mediating variable that become a link, that creates a link between independent and dependent variable. Don't worry, I'm going to show you in a pictorial format so you will understand more. So let me give you a simple example. Say, for example, a mother and father has an argument and they are not talking. So what will happen in that case? The father may ask the daughter, can you tell your mother this? And the mother can ask the daughter, can you tell your father this? Okay, so you have somebody, the mediating in between, somebody who mitigates. Okay, like when you are buying and selling, the buyer and seller, in between you have somebody, works as an agent, that become mediating variable. I hope it is very clear. So we have mediating in between the two, moderating in between the two, but moderating it increases the relationship or decreases the relationship, right? But mediating is not there. Mediating is independent to mediating two dependent variable. All right. Okay. That's basically the most important variables in a research, but we do have also two different kind of variables that we do also use in research nowadays. There might be some cases whereby you may need antecedent variable before independent variable. Now, many of you would ask me, the independent variable and antecedent variable are the same, right? Oh yeah, definitely they are the same. Sometimes we do call independent variable as antecedent because that leads to the dependent variable. But again, there are cases out there whereby you may have even antecedent before independent. So if you have variable that causes the independent and independent causes the dependent, so the causes of independent become antecedent. So again, I'm going to show you in a variable how we draw that and you will understand more. Okay. Later, we may have one more kind of variable in certain kind of research, depending on the nature of the problem that we have identified and defined. We may have outcome variable that is after dependent variable. Again, many students try to argue with me whether dependent and outcome variables are the same. Of course, they are the same. Okay, the dependent variable is your outcome variable. That is normal case. Okay, but there are cases whereby you may have a dependent variable which is hanging. It does not really provide all the answers that is expected from a research. Then we may have an outcome variable. We may introduce an outcome variable after the dependent variable. I hope it clarifies the doubts and controversies surrounding antecedent and outcome variable. It is not necessary to have it for all research. Depending on the nature of problem, certain problem we may require to have antecedent before dependent and outcome variable after the dependent variable. All right, so how do you develop a theoretical framework? Definitely it comes from the materials that we get from literature review. All right. So those of you who did not listen yet my video on systematic literature review, please find time to watch. It is available in my YouTube channel. I think there are 2-3 different videos out there. You should find time to watch it to understand how you should be conducting a systematic literature review, and through that we'll identify the theories that underpin our theories, and also we will identify the right kind of variables that is essential to solve the problem that we have. Now, so theoretical framework basically identifies the variable as we have mentioned earlier, and also it illustrates the interaction between the variables that we have chosen for our study. So this is a theoretical framework on the topic of factors affecting internet abuse at the workplace. Okay, so looking at the title, we know internet abuse is the dependent variable. Okay, and what influence people to abuse internet is the attitude, could be subjective norm, could be perceived behavioral control. So looking at the diagram, this is dependent variable, right? So this variable is dependent on the other three variables. That's why you call it as dependent variable. And these three are independent variables. So this variable is stand alone. They are separated, not related to each other. If they are related to each other, and when we construct questionnaire that overlap in independent variable items, then you will have autocorrelation problem later. So they must be independently stands alone. So those are independent variable. Now, when we have this framework in front of you, then reviewers, examiners will ask you, what is the theory that underpin your framework, or what is the theory that is being used to develop or construct this hypothesis? I think most of you know, those are familiar with TPB, theory of planned behavior. So that is the theory that explains. So the attitude, subjective norm, perceived behavioral control. These variable, three variables are taken from theory of planned behavior. Okay. So we have a theory that underpins that. Okay. And internet abuse, basically intention to abuse internet. This also comes from theory of planned behavior. So whenever we choose any framework, there must be an underpinning theory. Okay. There must be an underpinning theories. If you cannot find one theory that underpins your framework, then you have to find more theories. So the dominating theory will become underpinning theory. And other theories that helps you to underpin your framework, those theories become supporting theory. So that answers the question, should I have only one theory, or I can have more than one theory? Okay. So you can have one theory, you can have more than one theory. You can integrate few theories and come out with a new framework. That is also expected in some kind of research. Okay. So you will have a dominating theory, you call it underpinning theory, or if you use only one theory to underpinning your framework, then it is underpinning theory. If you have more than one theory, the dominating theory is the underpinning theory, and the other theories are basically supporting theories. Now, how many hypotheses can we have here? Basically, we can have three relationships here, right? There's a relationship between attitude towards internet abuse and internet abuse. This is hypothesis number one. Hypothesis number two, there is a relationship between subjective norm and internet abuse. And hypothesis number three, perceived behavioral control affects internet abuse. So basically, you have three hypotheses here. You do not have more than that. Huh? You do not have more than that. I have seen theses whereby students have more hypotheses than what they have in the framework, which is not correct. Huh? We'll tell the student this is wrong. You cannot simply just assume anything without the support of a theory or the theoretical framework. All hypotheses should be constructed based on the framework that you have developed. Okay. So this is hypothesis one, this is hypothesis two, this is your hypothesis three. So you have basically three hypotheses here based on this framework. Huh? So I have written the hypothesis for you, and I have written it three different ways. Hypothesis can be written in many different ways and different formats. Okay. I'm going to share this slide with you. So you are going to have this. So it will have easier time for you to write the hypothesis of your thesis. All right. Now, the synonyms of independent variable, we have to understand that independent variable are basically predictors. Independent variable are the presumed cause or stimulus. In the predicted form, right? An antecedent, or it could be something that is manipulated. Okay. So many different kind of terms we use for independent variable as well as for dependent variable. For dependent variable, we do use as a criterion, do use as a presumed effect, okay, as response, predicted to, consequence, like outcome, right, and measured outcome. So these are the terms alternatively used at different times in different papers by different examiners. So you got to be familiar, all right? If examiner asks you what are the predictors of your dependent variable, then you must understand that he's talking about independent variables, okay? And if your examiner is talking about criterion variable, then it is definitely dependent variable. All right, look at the consequences or the outcome of a problem, right? So that is a dependent variable. Okay, let me move into something very important, relevant, and a bit complex also. Remember, I started the session with research problem. We said that if you do not have a research problem, then you don't have a research. A research is undertaken with an identified and defined research problem. Okay, so if you look at this title, it's a real PhD title of one of my PhD student. His title is Financial Risks, Business Risks, Firm Value, the moderating role of financial innovation. So if you look at the title, you know firm value is the dependent variable, financial risks and business risks is independent variable, and financial innovation is his moderating variable. All right. So when you are plotting your research problem, those of you who have attended my webinar on research problem, I think you understood it very well. You can actually plot your research problem into a template. So this is a template that I have designed for you all to plot your research problem so that it becomes easier for you to explain to your examiners. I notice, most of the Viva session that I have attended, examiners should be always talking about what are the issues, what are the issues. What is your main problem? The problem is not really highlighted. I cannot find the research problem. So that kind of problem, the questions are always there. So to simplify your life, to make it easier for you, I have created this template for you. So main problem is the dependent variable. So when you write research problem in chapter 1, you have to start writing from your dependent variable because that is your problem. Okay. Most of the time, a student will have misunderstanding on it. They will straight go to independent variable one by one and explain the causes. But you have to prove, first of all, that you have a problem. So this student has to prove that there is a problem with the firm value. And that's why he said the banking sector has been witnessing a significant decline in earnings and profitability. So he's saying the firm value is in a declining trend. Okay, so there is a problem, and he has supported the data from the industry. So you prove that there is a problem. So when you write research problem, you start with dependent variable. And after that, you talk about issues one by one, and each issue is an independent variable. And your moderating variable become another issue, right? Or mediating variable become another issue. So for this student, I put it as one sub-problem and sub-problem number 2, because he has independent variable under one group and he has dependent moderating variable in another group. So under the sub-problem 1, he has issue 1, issue 2, issue 3, issue 4, and issue 5. So now, when you talk about the issues, you cannot simply just talk about it. It must be supported by data. And I have given clues how can you write that. From annual report, from World Bank, from your national bank, syndicated organization like that provide all kind of data available for you. So you have to collect some kind of data from industry where the problem is rooted, and we have to prove issues one by one, okay? And then you have to show those issues actually contributing to the main problem in hand. So, and then he is also looking at industrial issues, which I recommend a lot. Looking at knowledge level or theoretical level is not allowed. This is about knowledge or theoretical gap, which will basically help you to do research from academic perspective. But when you do research from academic perspective, it must have application in the industry, in the society where the problem is rooted. Okay, so we do have to identify issues in the context of research, the premise of research, or the industry, or the society or nation where practically we are involved in it, right? So this student has also identified 4 issues coming from the industry. All right, that makes his definition of research problem is stronger. Okay, so you are defining from theoretical perspective, you are defining the problem from practical perspective. Okay, that answers the question. Many students ask me the question, is the literature gap same as research problem? My answer would be yes, partly, but not fully. Okay, literature gap is this, your theoretical gap. Okay, this is part of your research problem, and this is your industrial issue, that is also part of your research problem. So gap from literature and gap from the industry. These two comes together. That will narrow down to your research problem. I hope that answers the question. Many students at many occasions ask me that question of whether literature gap is same as the research problem. Huh? So it is partly yes, partly no. So your research problem should be defined through literature gap as well as identified practical issues or the gap in the industry. Okay. Now, based on this, the same title that you have, financial risks, business risks, and firm value, this student has the research questions, basically 4 research questions. Okay. Remember, your theoretical framework should be a translation of research problem, but you cannot transform or translate research problem into framework directly. So what you have to do is transform or translate your research problem into few research questions, and from those research questions you translate it into a theoretical framework. Okay, so this student basically have 4 research questions. Does financial risk affect firm value? What impact does business risk have on the firm value? And he has 2 moderating research questions. All right, based on that he designed this framework. You can see it here. So financial risks, he has credit risks, liquidity risks, operational risks, market risks, and solvency risks. These are the issues that I have shown you earlier, right? You can see it here. These are the issues that 6 issues he has. So those issues now plotted in the framework, okay? And then business risk is one of the research issue. So all those 6 issues are being plotted in the research problem. Each become one independent variable, and the sub problem 2 become your moderating variable. All right, and then this student does have also control variables. Okay, so bank size, GDP, profitability, those are basically control variable. I will have discussion later in a slide to show you why control variables are necessary. Do we need to have control variable in every research? No, definitely not. Few researches only. All right, in economics, finance, and accounting research, we may introduce control variable. Marketing management research, we may not introduce control variable at all. Okay, so when he put hypothesis 1 for credit risk, liquidity risk, operational risk, market risk, and solvency risk, actually under this hypothesis he has 5 sub hypotheses, right? He has five sub hypotheses. I hope this is clear to you. Okay, now this is how he is writing hypothesis 1, and from there he has 5 sub hypotheses. And as I said earlier, I'm going to share the slide with you, so you can have a closer look into how we write hypothesis. Okay, you can see here he has a negative, and he does have also positive significance on values. All right, so this is basically based on the literature review that he has gone through. This is hypothesis on the moderating variable. Okay, so because the first one he has 5 items. All right, so he has 5 sub hypotheses moderating, and hypothesis 4 basically just one. Business risk is 10 alone, so he has just one moderating hypothesis. So for this student, basically main hypotheses are 4, but if you look at total number of hypotheses, he has 5 here sub hypotheses, and he has 5 sub hypotheses here. So he has 5, 5, 10, and 1 moderating, 1 independent. So he has about 12 hypotheses he has tested in his research. Okay. Now I'm sure that it clarifies some of your doubts on how should you develop or construct a hypothesis, and based on that, how should you construct the hypothesis for a study. Okay, now I have talked about independent and dependent variable, a bit of moderating and all that, but let me go into detail of each type of variable. Antecedent variables. Let me show you from a diagram. That's what we looked at earlier, right? So we say this is independent variables, and these are the independent variable, and this is the dependent variable. But for this specific research on internet abuse, this is also from a real PhD thesis. This is not something I'm just talking about from my thinking. It's not. I've taken it from a real PhD thesis. This student has antecedent variable. Okay, So for his study, attitude is formed by usefulness, ease of use, because you are talking about attitude towards internet abuse, playfulness and compatibility. Those of you are familiar with theory of TAM, technology acceptance model. If you are familiar with TAM model, then you would know this 4 dimension come from TAM. As I said, every variable that you propose must be supported by a theory. And the same goes to the next 2 blocks. All those also supported by theories. Well, this student, he felt that it's necessary because he had identified correctly with the support of theories to have antecedent variables. Okay. So how many hypotheses can we have now? So from independent to dependent, we have 3 hypotheses. Am I right? We looked at earlier. But then you have 4 hypotheses on attitude: usefulness and attitude, ease of use and attitude, playfulness and attitude, compatibility and attitude. So you have 4 hypotheses there. And same goes on subjective norm. You have also 4 hypotheses there. And perceived behavioral control, you have 5 hypotheses there. So you have even 4, 4, 8, and 5, 13. You have 13 antecedent hypotheses. And independent to dependent, you have 3 hypotheses. Okay. So as I answered earlier, the question that usually student pose, that do I have to have antecedent variable? The answer is no, depending on the nature of problem, depending on the kind of variable I have chosen as independent, and depending on the kind of framework that you like to construct for your research. Okay. Now let me go into moderating variable. This is how it is. A variable in between independent and dependent variable. And as I said earlier, the relationship between independent to dependent can be strengthened, can be weakened. The relationship between independent and dependent can be increased, can be decreased with the introduction of a moderating variable. Can you simply just think of a variable and put it as a moderating variable? Definitely not. Again, there are certain assumptions. For a variable to be moderator, there are certain prerequisites are there which must be fulfilled before we propose a variable to be a moderating variable or to be a moderator. Okay, so this is how it is. Your satisfaction affects the loyalty. If employees are satisfied, they become loyal to the organization. And it can be moderated by gender. It depends on male and female. Okay, so male have different things satisfied male and different things satisfied female. Okay, so a gender could be a moderating variable. So relationship between satisfaction and loyalty can be moderated by a gender. It can be moderated by marital status also, right? A single, different things satisfy a single individual who is a single and an individual who is married. Different things satisfied them. Okay, so it can be even a moderator. This is a goal setting theory, looking at setting goals to performance. The ability of performing the task could be a moderating variable. Okay, so as we say, the moderator specifies the condition under which a given effect occurs, as well as the condition under which direction or nature or strength of effect vary. Right? So Barron and Kenny, that's the paper you should be reading. It's a must-read paper for all researchers to understand variables. Okay, Barron and Kenny has set certain prerequisites for a variable to be moderating. So we say the qualitative or quantitative variable. Moderating can be a qualitative, could be a quantitative, meaning it could be the gender, it could be the race, and all that can be moderating variable. It could be even the quantitative variable in terms of numbers and all that could be also a moderative variable that affects the direction, meaning that the strength or the weakness of relationship between predictor and the criterion variable, right? Predictor is independent variable, criterion is a dependent variable. Earlier we said that, right? So a basic moderating effect can be presented as an interaction between focal independent variable and a factor, that's moderator. All right. So moderator variables are typically introduced when there is an unexpectedly weak or inconsistent relationship between a predictor and a criterion variable. This is very important. I put it in red. Based on the literature review, if we see the relationship between independent and dependent is not really fully established, meaning some researchers found there is an effect, some researchers found there is no significant effect, some researchers found positive effect, some found negative effect, those kind of inconsistent findings are there, then we'll use a moderating variable in between them. Okay, for example, the relationship between husband and wife. The relationship is not always good, right? Sometimes little misunderstanding happens. Sometimes the relations are very good. So it's a bit inconsistent, okay? It's a bit inconsistent. So to test the relationship, you can introduce a moderating variable, say for the example, kids in between them, our fathers and mothers in between them, to test how weak or strong our relationship is, okay? That's how a moderating variable works. When the relationship between independent and dependent is not fully established, then we can introduce a moderating variable. That's what Barron and Kenny advocates, okay? A moderating variable is also the one that affects the relationship between two variables, right? So that the nature of impact of a predictor on the criterion variable according to the level of value of a moderator. This is what the similar thing that we talk about, right? The next paragraph also similar, so I'm not going to read it. So that's how it is, right? It has to be like that. Now, how do you write the moderating hypothesis? So should I hypothesize the form of my introduction in advance? Yes. You have to say whether it strengthen or weaken the relationship. Whether the moderating effect going to be positive or negative must be specified. Okay, this is the question that I always get. You cannot simply just say that this variable moderates the relationship between this and this. It's not right, not acceptable. Okay, based on Dawson, you must specify the relationship. So you said this variable will strengthen the relationship between this and this. Then it is moderating. Okay, so the role of innovation, okay, strengthen the relationship between business risks and farm value. So strengthen or weaken, positive or negative, that kind of direction should be provided in the moderating hypothesis. So you can see here, the positive relationship between satisfaction and loyalty would be stronger when perceived image is high. So we are providing the direction in the hypothesis itself. The positive relationship between satisfaction and loyalty would be stronger when male compared to female. Now, the question is, how do I know the effect will be stronger or the effect will be weaker? How do you know that? Again, it comes from literature support. We cannot say anything from our own. In research, as we say, it is a very systematic process. So everything we say, it must be guided. It must be with strong citation and references before you propose anything, all right? We cannot say anything on our own. It must come through literature. Now, this is what earlier I was talking, that if you have a problem that requires some kind of integration, if you find that research has been done on macro, say for example, this example, macro, meso, and micro, studies on this area, basically done in 3 segregated ways. So this student claims that no one has done a study by integrating 3 factors together. So she has integrated the research problem into 3 sub-dimensions, all right? And then based on that, she found underpinning theories, and then she proposed a new framework. Okay, so that's how she has integrated. All these factors that you see as independent variables are being integrated for macro, meso, and micro. Okay, so she has combined 3 and came out with a new framework. That's what I was saying earlier. You do not necessarily need to have one theory to underpin your theoretical framework. You may have integration of theories. When you find the nature of problem is such, one theory is not adequate or sufficient to answer, find the answer or solutions to the problem, then you got to integrate few theories together So the dominating theory become underpinning theory, and the other theories become supporting theories to underpin your theoretical framework. So this is how she has done it, all right? Earlier I have shown you. This is a similar kind of research that she has undertaken. Now let us look at mediating variable. As I said earlier, mediating variable is also the one that intervenes the relationship between independent and dependent, all right? It comes in between. Independent and dependent is also one kind of intervening variable. So we say that despite the extensive use of complex statistical modeling in behavioral sciences, the quality of research project is largely determined by the design decisions that are made before any analysis is done, or even before the study is conducted, all right? So the kind of study that we do, most of it basically behavioral, and therefore some kind of conceptualization of mediation analysis is expected, all right? That's what McKinnon et al. Has recommended. So a mediator specifies how a given effect occurs, all right? Describe a mediating variable in the following way. So I have given citation on Barron and Kenny, James Bett and Barron and Kenny again in 1986, right? So different kind of papers. So to be mediating, we say the generative mechanism through which the focal independent variable is able to influence the independent variable of interest. So it's mediation. It is best done in the case of a strong relation between predictor and criterion variable. Now, let me explain a bit on it, the difference between mediation and moderation. We argued that we introduce moderating variable when the relationship between independent and dependent is not strong enough, is not fully established. But we introduce mediator when the relationship between independent and dependent is fully established. Okay, so previous studies concluded that there is a strong relationship between predictor, which is independent variable, and criteria, which is dependent variable. So previous research has documented that there is a strong relationship between independent and dependent. Then we can introduce a new variable as mediating. Okay, but when literature documented that relationship between independent and dependent is not strong enough, is not fully established, then we will introduce a moderator. I hope that clarifies many of your doubts. Again, can we simply just propose something as mediator? No. Again, it must be supported by literature. It must be supported by literature. Last month, when I was conducting a webinar in India, one participant asked me, sir, in social science research, all of you are saying everything must be supported by literature. What happens if I cannot find anything from literature? What should I do? Can I just propose something on my own? I said, definitely no. You cannot answer or put anything on your own. You cannot introduce a new independent variable from your own understanding. You cannot. You cannot propose a new mediator or moderator from your own understanding. You cannot. Then the question asks me, then how do you expect me to show you the new knowledge? Very good question, right? Most of you, when you defend your PhD thesis in the final viva voce, you will be sweating to answer this question. What is your new knowledge contribution? If you cannot prove any new knowledge contribution, you won't get your PhD. So how do I prove new knowledge? So you have to introduce a new independent variable, new mediating or moderating variable, at least one. Then if I don't have support, how do I introduce new one? So my answer is very simple. When you read a paper, please make sure you read the end part of every paper where the author has provided suggestion for future research. That's where the authors will say that we have covered this other one and we could not cover this other one, So they will say my R square was 50%, meaning my study captured only 50% factors affect dependent variable, meaning that 50% causes are not captured in my theoretical framework. So that author will say in suggestion for future research, these are the possible factors may be researched to capture more causes of the problem. So even though that factors have not been studied, but somebody has recommended, that become your citation. So you can pick up one of the variable from suggestion from future research and plot it in your theoretical framework, and you claim there, you have a big claim, this variable has not been tested by anyone before. Then how do you find a citation? Because this is the author who has proposed these factors could be, good factors to be researched. That's how we find new factors. I hope that answered the question that most of you switch during your Viva, or most of you struggle to find an answers of, do I have to find everything from the literature? Yes. Anything we talk about in a research must be cited. There must be proper citation there. So that's where we get the citation, suggestion for future research. All right. Now, again, PC Sadish and Sweeney, 1991, stated that the independent variable causes the mediator, which will then cause the outcome. Okay, this is another point, very important. Independent will cause the mediating, then mediating will cause the dependent. But before that, we said that the relationship between independent and dependent is fully established. But then I'm saying independent going to mediator, mediator going to dependent. How does it work? That one I'm going to show you afterwards. Okay. So we say critical prerequisite is that a significant association between independent and dependent variable. And then after that, we'll test the mediating effect. All right. This is how the prerequisites are. McKinnon et al. 1995. He proposed this mediating effect, right? The IV significantly affect the dependent variable in the absence of mediator. So that's what you have to do it first. You have to prove that there's a strong relationship between independent and dependent. That one first. After that, you will have hypothesis from independent to mediator. And then you will have mediator to dependent. And after that, we will have mediating hypothesis. So we have 4 different set of hypotheses there that have to be tested. I think it's good for me to mention it here. Also last month, I think I was chairing a Viva session, a PhD student. And then the student has independent, dependent, and mediating. But then he did not test the relationship between independent and dependent. He tested only mediating to dependent. And he thought his study is done. So, as a chairman, I have to intervene. I have no choice. So I told the student, you have to understand, there are certain prerequisites for a theoretical framework. If you are proposing a mediating, you have to prove the relationship between independent and dependent first. That's McKinnon et al., right? 1995, which is accepted and agreed by everyone in the world. So you have to have case to prove that there is a relationship between independent and dependent. And then only we test the mediating. So I told the student, if there is no relationship between father and mother, how can you test the mediating relationship of kids in between husband and wife? Can you do that? How can you test the mediating effect of kids in between mother and father if there is no relationship between mother and father? So that's what the student has done. He did not establish the relationship between mother and father, and he tested the mediating effect. I said, this is totally wrong. Okay, so please bear that in mind. You cannot test mediating effect without establishing the relationship between independent and dependent. So this is how you do test the mediator, right? Baron and Kenny 1986 formulated this way, right? But I did not show you the independent to dependent, right? So mediator is tested that, provided that you have tested the relationship between independent to dependent, right? So independent to dependent, you will have main hypothesis. Then independent to mediator is your hypothesis. Then mediator to dependent, you have hypothesis. And then you will have a combined mediating effect hypothesis. So you have 4 different sets of hypotheses there. So this is how it should be. So if you are using a mediating variable, your framework will look like that. Independent to dependent, independent to mediating, mediating to dependent. Please make sure this is the one you use, not this one, right? Not this one. This is the one if you are using mediation or mediating variable. But again, always remember that independent to dependent, that relationship must be established, must be agreed upon by previous researchers. Then only we introduce a mediating. But again, it has to be through literature, all right? There must be some proper citation why you introduce a mediating like that, right? So there could be cases whereby the mediating variable, previous research has proved that mediating has effect on dependent, okay, separately, and independent to mediating separately, but they have not tested it together. So that could be a good way of proposing a mediating variable for you. This is wrong, okay? That's what many people will do. So you are giving independent to mediator, mediator to dependent. This is totally wrong. Please understand it. This is totally wrong. Supposed to be like this. Based on McKinnon, right? You have to fulfill the prerequisites first before you can introduce that. This is not right. Okay. This is one framework that shows how we draw a theoretical framework having mediating variable. So you're dependent to independent, and then you're dependent to mediating, and then mediating to depending variable, right? So that's how it should be drawn. So you can see here also a bit complex model. This model is very complex. You have independent, basically attitude and subjective norm and organization climate. Dependent is intention to share knowledge, and from there we have two outcome variable, explicit and implicit knowledge. And even before attitude, we do have antecedent variable, okay? So you have antecedents, you have mediating, right? You have mediating, and then you have dependent, and you have outcome variable. So you may have even cases like it, a bit complex model. I know some supervisors, they love to have to make the framework complex. The students also, they like to make it complex, but it depends on the nature of the problem. Do not always think that I have to propose something complex so that people feel like, oh, I'm doing a great job. That's not the way we do it. The kind of theoretical framework that I would like to have is completely depend on the nature of problem that I have identified. The problem in hand got to be kept in mind. Okay, we clearly define the research problem, we identify the issues, and then we plot those issues as a cause, as independent variable, and then the problem becomes dependent variable. All right, so that's how we should be approaching to a research projects when you undertake. So there are also models like that, right? You have seen it before. You know that theory of planned behavior was proposed first of all as a theory of reason action, and then they have modified it and proposed a new one, TPB, right? Theory of planned behavior, and from there even you have thought and a few other models came up, right? Revised versions also available for research. These are the good papers which you should read. I have earlier cited, and again, this slide is going to be available for you in my YouTube channel. These papers can be easily found in Google even. You just put the title of this paper in Google, you will get that paper. If you do not get these papers, if you need my help, you can email me. I can share the paper with you. Okay, the outcome variable. I think I have explained to you the antecedent variable, dependent variable, mediating variable, moderating variable, right? So let me explain now the outcome variable. The outcome variable is, I have explained it earlier, that it is just after the dependent variable, right? So certain cases, you may need to have outcome variable, and I have, let me show you this. This is a model that earlier I have shown you. This is your dependent variable, and this is your independent variables. Now, if you do a study like this, and you conclude that these are the factors that contribute to internet abuse. Now, if someone come up and ask you a question, So what? Internet is abused, so what? So how would you answer that question? So when you have a dependent variable like that do not really conclude your research, that do not necessarily provide complete answers of the research questions that you have, then you may be required to have outcome variables. So here this student is saying that internet abuse will lead to some organization outcomes and some psychological outcomes. So that will conclude the research, that will provide complete answers of the research questions being translated from a research problem. So if you end research on internet abuse, it does not conclude your research. It does not. So you have to introduce outcome variables in this kind of study. Again, I have to make it very clear. Is it necessary to have outcome variable in all research? The answer is no. Is the dependent variable, outcome variable are the same? Most of the cases are same. But there are cases they are not the same. Okay? So here you will have few outcome variable, all right? So that's where you will have hypothesis based on outcome variable, right? So dependent variable, internet abuse leads to organization outcomes. So you have two hypotheses there, and internet abuse will lead to some psychological outcomes, and you have two hypotheses there. And I have written the hypothesis for you. Since you will be having the slides, so you can review it later by yourself. Okay, now let me move to control variable. Do we need control variable for a study? No. In management marketing studies, we do not really use that. But for pure science, applied science, for medical, for engineering, for economics, finance, accounting, we may need to introduce control variable. All right. A simple example is like when a company is producing shampoo. So we clean our hair with shampoo. If you clean with a controlled environment, and then you got to test it with uncontrolled environment, with the outside temperature and all that. So you have that kind of control, so variable being used in a controlled environment, in uncontrolled environment. So that's what we need certain time in research to have control variable. So control variable is basically purification variable that helps you to purify the relationship between independent and dependent. Okay, so we say that general notion is that control variable uses is researchers can remove predictor and criterion contamination. The contamination between the relationship with independent and dependent, okay, can be removed by including few control variables, okay, which is very important. I think those of you attending the session with me now from pure science or applied science or engineering or medical, you would explain it better than me. Right? But for finance and accounting and economics, we do use control variable a lot, okay, because those control variables are already like those variables are concluded to have effect on dependent variables. So we'll pick some of these variables as control variables. So these are the some control variables you always use. For example, like gender, male, female, the different thing. Male, the characteristics, the way we think, the way we work could be different, may not be the same, right? The different age group of people, teenager, have different thinking than an adult, so as goal by aged people, a tenure of work in an organization, level of education, like all these examples that I've given you, these are the control variables can be always employed in most of the studies, beside those economics and finance study. So this is a theoretical framework, but again I say, right, identify research gap, and from there you plot a research problem, research framework, and with a theory. So this student has proposed this theoretical framework with the prospect theory as underpinning theories, and then he has control variable. That's what I wanted to show you, right? So bank size, GDP, profitability, diversification, those are used as control variable. That basically remove the contamination on the relationship between financial risks and farm value and business risks and farm value. All right, so those works as control variable. And use of control variable over time, you can see it's being used a lot. It's being used a lot, but as time goes by, it is reducing for certain areas, and certain areas they are not. It's still being used. I think steps in hypothesis, we know very well that to start with, I have shown it earlier at the beginning. You start with research problem. Once research problem is identified and defined, then we translate the research problem into research questions. Then we identify the causes. Those causes become the research question, right? Those become the independent variable. And then independent variable to dependent variable, we plot it in the theoretical framework. And from there, we will construct the hypothesis. We'll collect data and we will conclude whether that hypothesis is accepted or rejected. Okay, so as we say in research, we cannot simply just accept or reject hypothesis, right? It has to be tested. So we collect data from the unit of analysis, right, where the problem is rooted. So we collect data from there using certain sampling techniques. Again, if you want to understand sampling on random sampling and non-random sampling, probability or non-probability sampling, I do have also a video available in my YouTube channel. Please listen to that to understand some misunderstanding and controversies surrounding sampling methods and size of sampling. You should watch that. It's a very good video. You should be considering to watch. Okay, so we cannot simply just reject a hypothesis. We have to reject hypothesis with the aid of data analysis. We collect the data, we employ certain statistical method, and then only we accept or reject hypothesis. So hypothesis, basically, as you remember, we said a theory, you start with ideas, then you go to concept, then you go to construct, then only you go for hypothesis, then we go to theory, right? So when you are hypothesizing, you are assuming or predicting certain kind of relationship between independent and dependent, or between independent moderating and mediating and dependent, right? So that's how the role of hypothesis, which is very important. This slide I'm not going to read. There are certain criteria to verify whether your hypothesis statements are good or not. So the three criteria are adequate for its purpose, testable, and better than its rivals. So this slide I'm going to leave it for your own reading. A slide will be available in YouTube channel, so please get that and review it by yourself. Now let me move into model. As I said that, excuse me. As I said that for certain kind of study, we do have theories and we will put them in a theoretical framework. But there are studies where theoretical framework is not important. We need to model it. Econometrics modeling and many other models are available. For the students are studying medical, engineering, pure science, economics, finance, accounting, modeling is very important. So Manfred Egan has differentiated a theory and model. He says a theory has only alternatives of being right or wrong. So when you have a theory, basically you have assumptions. When you collect data, then you test hypothesis, accept or reject. When you accept is right, or reject is wrong. You cannot do more than that. But in model, you have another possibility. He said can be right, but maybe irrelevant. Okay. So in a theory, we just conclude this is right, this is wrong. But in model, we say right or wrong. At the same time, we can say this is right, but not relevant. Possible. So that's why we use modeling. So it depends on the nature of problem again. I'm repeating many times on this. It depends on the nature of problem in hand. So certain kind of problem is just concluding right or wrong is not enough. Even if proof is right, the case may not be relevant to your situation. That got to be also concluded. Whether it's relevant, it's not relevant. Okay, so that is the model. That's the role of a model. The model will help you to do that. So we say that a presentation of a system that is developed to study part of the system or the whole system relationship, that's called model. This is something very important that you need to understand. When you do model or modeling, we can put the full framework in one equation, or we can go for a smaller model, and smaller model, finally we have the final model. I have supervised a student from Jordan, and she did a study on stock market, stochastic modeling, and she had 101 equations. Okay, so after 101 modeling, she has the final model of her research. So that's how it is. In economics, finance, or engineering, pure science, you will have that. You have many different equations, and finally you come out with one equation. So you have many models, sub-model, and finally come out with one model. So you test by sub-model, and then finally we test the final model for a study. So this is how it is. The model that I have proposed you earlier, the business risks and financial risks are going to form value with some mediating, right, with control variable and one moderating variable. So this student has 4 models finally, right? So the last one you see is the final model. So that's how it works. So when you choose to use modeling, then you will have model specifications. Model 1, Model 2, Model 3, Model 4. And like my finance student, this on the stochastic optimization, had 101 model. Finally, she came out with the final model, right? So specification of model takes time, and then you have a few steps to go through. All right, so let me recall back what we have learned so far. I started with theories, concepts, theories, constructs, hypotheses, and theory. Then we look into theoretical framework. We have identified variables, right? Independent variable, dependent variable, mediating, moderating variable. We look into antecedents and outcome variable. We look into how we construct or develop hypotheses. We look at all that, okay? And I have also given you examples of how to justify selection of mediating or moderating variable of your study. Now let us move into different one. We call it conceptual framework. So we have done with theoretical framework. Now we move into conceptual framework. As I said earlier, that depending on your research problem that you have identified and defined, if you find theories that helps you to underpin the theoretical framework and develop a theoretical framework, you can easily identify variables, construct, so you develop a theoretical framework. So what happens? You identify and define the real research problem, but you cannot find any theory to underpin your research. Okay, so then you have to go for conceptual framework. And if you have understood the building blocks of a theory, it starts with ideas. When you screen the ideas and make it relevant, understandably become concept. That's where we are now. From concept, we go to construct, then hypothesis, then theory. But conceptual framework, we are just above the idea, the second building blocks of a theory. So based on the concept. So as a conceptual scheme is how researcher formulates the relationship between factors identified as an important in the study of a problem formulated from past studies, as well as logic and belief. So you are not depending on any theory. You are not depending on any philosophies. Okay. So now you are developing a scheme, a framework based on your logic and your own beliefs. So you are looking at the society, the industry, the nation, the world at large, and you observe and you perceive that certain kind of problem persists there. And to explain that problem, you cannot find any theories, but you would like to solve the problem. In that case, you have to go for conceptual framework. Okay, and as I said earlier, you have to use underpinning theory, not underpinning theory, rather you have to use the theory which doesn't support with a certain kind of specialized theories, right? That's what you have to do it. Now, conceptual framework, we say it is defined as a visual or written product, one that explains either graphically or in narrative form. So you again may have graphical presentation like theoretical framework, or you may have even just narratively explained why what you want to do, right? Showing the presumed relationship between the 2 or 3 variables, okay, or factors. So we say it presents a less formal attempt in organizing phenomena than theories. So we are more focused on phenomena, the problem, rather than theories, because we don't have theories there, okay? So we use grounded theory, remember, data-driven theories. So we collect data, and then we do analysis, and from there we conclude, right? That's where the theory comes in, okay? It deals with concepts that are assembled by virtue of relevance to a common theme, all right? So we are not organizing or assembling facts and figures with the support of a theory. It's not, right? So we are looking at the relevance to the problem itself. It broadly presents understanding of the phenomena of interest and reflects assumptions and philosophical views of the model designer. So now you are talking about yourself. You are designing, it's your own. So that is your inductive approach. You're starting from crash is 0, and from there you want to come out with something, okay? So it's completely dependent on your philosophic views and your assumptions. But when it comes to theoretical framework, it's nothing yours. It's taken from existing theories, okay? From existing theories, we take the variables, and then we assume relationship, we test them. But conceptual framework, we do not take it from existing theories. Rather, it is dependent on my philosophical views, my perception, my assumptions. Then I put it in a graphical view or in a narrative format, and then I show a framework, right? That's what you call conceptual framework. This is what is one example of a conceptual framework. You are looking at computer literacy, all right? And you are looking at the variable that may impact the participants and their skill level, right? And then skill level will contribute to literacy of computer among the kids. So this is about child literacy research being done by Monash University, and I have taken it from them. So this is one of the good example of how a conceptual framework can be drawn. So you are not testing any hypothesis. You are assuming, right, in a conceptual way, right? Conceptual way. You are showing in a graphical presentation or in a narrative presentation. That's how this one affect this one affect this one. Finally, will contribute to constitute the computer literacy among the child, okay? Among a child or among children. All right. So this is a good example which you can keep in mind if you are working on especially social science. Most of you will be using conceptual framework. That's how it works. So you will be using inductive approach and definitely with a grounded theory approach, right? You start with collecting new data, and then you refine the data, you analyze the data, and finally you come out with something new that help us to solve the problem being identified and defined at the beginning of the research. So these are the steps that is in conceptual framework. We start with research problem, then we hypothesize it, Then we develop a conceptual framework, then we continue to have assumptions. Then only we review literature, we design research, we collect the data, we process the data, we analyze, and finally we make a conclusion. If you look at it, definitely it is completely different from the theoretical framework, right? In theoretical framework, we have basically research problem. From there, we review literature, we identify variables, we plot them in theoretical framework, then we construct hypotheses, we collect data, we test hypotheses, finally we make a conclusion, right? So conceptual framework and theoretical framework, two totally different kind of study, okay? So in a conceptual framework, you may use quantitative data sometime, but most of the time you use qualitative study, right? Qualitative most of the time. But in a theoretical study, most of the time it is quantitative data, all right? To answer the question that we have, that's particularly deductive, right? So in theoretical framework, we will use the deductive approach. When conceptual framework, we use inductive approach. So we have to remember that. And also, we cannot forget about the 5 types of research design. Remember, we talk about descriptive, reporting, explanatory, exploratory, and predictive kind of research design. We have to keep that in mind also, right? Once you identify problem, then we'll be looking at those kind of research design also, right? To finalize whether I should go for conceptual framework, I should go for theoretical framework. And I'm also giving you a clear, demarcation lines between theoretical framework and conceptual framework. So this slide, I'm not going to explain much since slides should be available for you. Very easy languages are being given. You can read and understand the differences between a theoretical framework and a conceptual framework. All right, so this could be another example of conceptual framework. It looks like theoretical framework, but this is based on concepts, okay, not based on theories. So EO conceptual framework could also be drawn, looks like a theoretical framework without supporting theories, okay. Once you say theoretical framework, it should be supported by theories. If you say conceptual framework, is supported by concepts. So that's one we have to keep in mind. This one also, I think I'll leave it to you. Characteristics of a good conceptual scheme. There are certain characteristics are there for us to see whether it is a good conceptual framework or not a good conceptual framework. So I leave this one for your own reading. Okay, my last slide for today. Okay, now we are talking about mixing, mixed methods or triangulation, which is getting very popular now. But again, you have to keep in mind that it is dependent on the nature of research problem that we have identified and defined. So triangulation approach is used when you require to have a combination of qualitative and quantitative. Once you have identified and defined research problem, which cannot be concluded based on qualitative alone, then you have to use qualitative, quantitative. So conduct studies simultaneously. You are collecting data in a qualitative way and also quantitative, right? Both way you are analyzing. It could be also ongoing qualitative with multiple waves of quantitative. So you are doing qualitative study, but again, you are collecting also quantitative data a few times. And you do qualitative study, then you collect data and verify whether your qualitative findings can be verified or validated by quantitative data. Okay. And then you may also have situation whereby you would like to have quantitative precedes qualitative, meaning that we do qualitative study first, then we collect quantitative data, we run it in SPSS, PLAs, or AMOS, whatever, and then we see whether the qualitative findings and quantitative findings conform. So there's a striking difference between those two. With the quantitative one, basically we give them close-ended questions, so we do not keep really much room for respondents to say their own thing. So in qualitative study, we have many additional data comes in. So that's where they speak their mind and they give certain additional data that never thought about it, So this is something very well recommended for now. Quantitative analysis before using qualitative, or even you can do a quantitative study and then you verify it with some kind of qualitative data. So say, for example, you are doing a study using quantitative approach, and then you can just interview 8 to 10 people for qualitative study, just to see whether your quantitative findings can be verified with qualitative findings that you have, okay? And then even you can have multiple one, series of performance, right? With qualitative, followed by quantitative, followed by qualitative. That's what we call triangulation, right? 3 there. Qualitative, then quantitative, then qualitative. So you can do literature review, look at the annual report, past history and all that, that is qualitative. And from there you proceed to quantitative data, and after that you interview people, or you do focus group discussion, or some other positive techniques, and you collect some data using qualitative, and again you verify the findings that we have using quantitative research, okay? So that's what we call triangulation. For many areas nowadays, we do recommend students to adopt a triangulation approach. If you do not want triangulation approach, then at least the mixed method is recommended. Combination of qualitative and quantitative. Quantitative and then verification by qualitative, or qualitative, after that we continue to do quantitative. That could be a good way of verify the findings that you have from qualitative or quantitative study. With that, I would like to conclude my session today, and now let me explain how this session will continue. Basically, we will give you a kind of link now, whereby we will take 5 students at a time in our STEAM yard. Okay, we'll take at a time 5 students, and you will come live, and you can ask question. And also, those of you have put questions in the chat box. We'll take some of this question. Madam Benazir Rahman is there. She will summarize some of the questions that we have asked. So let me introduce some other people who are helping me here. Is Benazir Rahman is an assistant professor of Northern University, Bangladesh. And she is basically helping me to compile the question that you have asked in the chat box. And we have engineer Maruf Hassan. I think his video is off. Yeah, he's on now. He has been very helpful to me. He does all the technical things. He is a certified cyber security expert. Okay, he's an assistant professor also at Daffodil International University. And moderator, you know, Mr. Brother Burhanuddin, who is a PhD scholar at International Islamic Institute Malaysia. So now we will provide you a link on the screen, and then you can join us live. So 4 of us are there, so we will take 6 of you there together. Then we'll let you ask the questions, and then I will try to answer the questions from there, besides taking question from the chat box. Okay, let me see the first question there. The first question by Shaharul Islam. He said, how can I ensure which theory is underpinning and other one theories among 3 theories? Okay, I think I have mentioned it quite clearly that when you have identified the variables, you look at the theory, which theory actually underpin most of the variables, or which theory support most of the variables. That theory will become your underpinning theory, and the rest theories would become supporting theories. Say, for example, in your variable, in your framework, you have 5 independent variables. So 3 variables supported by 1 theory. That theory is underpinning theory. And the other 2 variables supported by 2 other theories. So those 2 other theories become supporting theories. I hope that clarifies, okay, the question. Anyone came live, Brother Maruf?
Yes, Brother Zaki is there.
Okay. Brother Zaki, can I have your question first? Then I will go on the screen again.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum, Prof.
Assalamu
First of all, thank you so much for this amazing webinar. It's very informative, alhamdulillah. I have 2 questions, please. The first one is, what is the, when I read the literature, I came across the variable called exonation, or I don't know, exonation variable and endogenous variable. Yeah, exogenous and endogenous. So
endogenous and exogenous. Exogenous are the independent variable, endogenous are the dependent variable.
Correct. So can I consider the exogenous is as antecedent variable and the endogenous as the outcome variable?
Yes.
That's correct.
Yes, you are right.
Okay. I have another question, please. Okay. Also, when I upgrade the theoretical framework that I already that is already exist in the literature, you know, by changing some dimension of the previous variable, and I add some new construct, or I change some dimensions of the previous variable that that already have in the literature. So can I call my new theoretical framework is a theoretical framework or conceptual framework?
No, basically, if your variables are coming from theories,
yeah,
then it's a theoretical framework. And if your research is deductive, because you are taking from theories.
You mean even if I add some new variable or change some dimension, still consider as a theoretical framework?
Yes, because when you have a construct and you change only items in the construct, still the variable remains the same, coming from the same theory. You follow
what
me?
about if I change the construct itself to a new construct?
If you are adding a new construct, again, that construct is not coming from you. There must be some citation. I have mentioned during the presentation. That one should come from the future research. So again, coming from citation. So what you are doing is you are just expanding a theory. You are modifying the theory. So it's a theoretical framework. It is not a conceptual framework.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof.
You are just expanding a theory, or you are modifying a theory. Okay?
And is this one with a good contribution?
Yeah, definitely. That's what is expected from you.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof.
Participants, those of you who are there, if you want the e-certificate, please fill in the form given in the chat box or on the screen. Please fill in the form in order to receive the certificate. Okay. All right. I have another question there on the screen. Can we use model? Okay. Sorry. This is your. Okay. This is your feedback form. Please fill up this form in order to receive the certificate. Please. It is on the screen now. It's on the screen now. Maybe Brother Maruf, you can keep that link on the screen, and I get question from Sister Merenji. You can keep that link on the screen. Okay. Please fill up this form. Take it from this and then fill up the form in order to get the set. Sister Banerjee, can you please tell me what are the questions you have with you?
Yes, sir. That is from Marjia Janna. Question is, she's asking whether she can use models in case of primary data or quantitative research analysis in case of in accounting background.
Sure. In accounting, finance, economics, I think mentioned during my presentation, we use most of the time modeling than theories. Theoretical framework. If you are collecting primary data, even primary data, you can still use modeling. Okay. Secondary data, definitely it is modeling. But the primary data, it depends on the nature of the kind of data you have. Okay, it depends on the kind of data you collect. So you can.
Thank you very much, sir. There's the second question from Nasiru. That is, Professor, please, at what instant in the students required to employ conceptual or theoretical framework, or can he employ both in a PhD research?
Good question. In one PhD research, you cannot employ both because you will either adopt inductive or deductive approach. If you are using inductive approach, you will have conceptual framework. If you are adopting deductive approach, you will have theoretical framework. You cannot use both at the same time. All right, I see a question on the screen. Let me take this question. Many authors discourage asking research questions that start with does and when it comes to how do you construct or write your research questions, we all have different views. It doesn't really matter. As long as you convince your examiners, board of examiners, panel members who review your thesis, that is fine. So it doesn't really matter you start with does or why or what, it doesn't really matter. As long as it is a question form, it has to be in interrogative form, then it should be fine. All right, Sister Banerjee? Yeah. Yes.
Can I give the second question? The next question is from Benazir Ahmed, who have a common name with me. That is, according to Barron and Kenny, they also say there is no need to have direct relationship between independent variable and dependent variable. Is
the
it
question
correct?
is a bit incomplete. You're not talking about mediating or moderating. If you mean mediating, then we expect a relationship to be stronger and fully established between independent and dependent. And I have given you an example of father and mother relationship, and the kids are intervening. If there is no relationship between father and mother, then how do you test the mediating effect of kids? Okay. So again, I would say we have to look at your research problem carefully, and then you construct your framework.
We have Brother Mahfuzul online, so he can.
Yeah, Brother
ask
Mahfuz,
question.
you can ask your question now. Brother Mahfuz? Hello, Brother Mahfuz, yes? Can you please ask your question? Is his microphone on or off?
No, I think his net is...
Okay, we keep him there. And Sister Banerjee, can you ask me another?
Yes. The next question is from Islam. That is, if I add two new variables with the other variables of a theory, of existing theory, would it be a conceptual
It is a theoretical framework.
theoretical
you are extending the theory, or you are modifying the theory. Yes, it's still theoretical framework.
Okay, there's another question that is from Mental Health with Kavita. That is theoretical framework different for different research method, whether mixed research or for quantitative research?
I did not really get the question.
Shall I repeat the question? Sir, okay. Is theoretical framework different for different research methods, whether mixed research or quantitative research? That means I think she wants to ask whether she can mix the different theories, different techniques of
Basically,
research.
if you are
Single
using deductive
model.
approach, using theories to underpin your framework, then your main study based on theoretical framework, okay, so it's quantitative. Then you can verify your quantitative findings using some qualitative data. That is fine. If you are using inductive approach, so your study is based on qualitative study. In that case, your study is based on qualitative data. But later you can collect some quantitative data to have a backup. I hope I clarified your question. So it depends on which approach you take, inductive or deductive. Okay, so you start with quantitative, then you back up it with qualitative. So if you are going for inductive, you start with qualitative, then you have a backup with quantitative. You can have the mix, no problem in both cases.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm taking the next question. That is, what the exactly difference between an intervening and mediating variable?
Basically, intervening variable. Mediating is one kind of intervening variable. Moderating is one kind of intervening variable. So if you want me to differentiate, I can. Both are the same. Both are the same. Mediating is an intervening variable, and one of the intervening variables.
He just needs to confirm that whether there is any thinner difference between. That's why I think he asked. Okay, then I think we have almost done with our question answer session. Like one student. Okay, yes, for Nasir, I think already we have answered most of the questions. Otherwise, we have got huge responses. All are appreciating about this webinar.
Thank you. Brother Maruf, can you put the form link again, the feedback form? Participants, those of you who are still online, please make sure you fill in the form. We will put the form in my YouTube channel. When you go to my YouTube channel, under this video, on the comments box, I will put the link of this form. So you should be able to fill up. So that form would be there for about 3 hours. So once we end the session, the form would be there for 3 hours. After that, it will be closed. So make sure you fill up the form within 3 hours after ending of the session, please. There's a question on the screen. I see a student said that, please, sir, can we have the recorded video? The video is already in my YouTube channel. So my YouTube channel now is live platform for research and development. So you have to just click there, the video will be there. So you just go to YouTube channel and you write platform for research and development. It will appear and then you will see the video available there for you. All of you, the video is there. And those of you attended, I hope you will all subscribe the channel. And you will share with your friends and ask your friends and colleagues to subscribe the channel also, right? So if there's no other question, then
I guess I don't know whether we can we have answered it. It has been showed earlier from Shahrul. That is, how can I ensure which theory is underpinning and the other are supporting
I think I have
theories
answered
among
that
the
question
three
earlier.
theories?
All right. Thank you very much.
So I think we
those of you who have participated to this webinar. Our next webinar is going to be towards the end of this month. Brother Maruf, you have that? Can you put it on the screen? Our next webinar. You can see on there. It's going to be
it is in bar.
Common question asked during viable session, tips and tricks to tackle them. So it's going to be an exciting session, inshallah, towards the end of this this month, okay, on 29th of November. So those of you are towards the end of the PhD journey, or even doing the PhD now, or thinking of doing PhD now, you should be attending to the session, okay? So keep in touch with my YouTube channel. It is going to be there. Link will be there on live. And those of you follow me in my Facebook, doctoral PhD support group or doctoral support group or research methodology group, I would always post the poster there, so you can follow up there. All right. All right. So thank you very much for your patient hearing and listening. And also, I would like to thank the organizer for organizing the event. Now I pass the session to the moderator, Brother Burhanuddin. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Muhammad Aminul Islam, for your wonderful presentation. Also, we thank all participants from different countries. We strongly hope that today's session will benefit our audience for their PhD journey in future in an advanced way. Also, we thank especially our co-organizer, University Tun Hussein on Malaysia, and University Parlis Malaysia, University Technical Malacca, and then Northern University Bangladesh, and CRAS and CIRPS. Also, I thank Brother Maruf and Sister Benazir for your cooperation. So we have some announcement. We have another event next Saturday, 28 November, about Islamic banking and finance in Bangladesh. Please, I want to request all of you to join our program. With that, we end today's session. Thank you very much for all of you for joining today's session. Thank you, Professor Dr. Islam, for your presentation. See you, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.